This is a Hot Pie Media original.
There was a meltdown, another meltdown by the professional college team in Austin, Texas. But I would say this, for 6 minutes of football, I would say, for once, just settle down, Texas fans. Just settle down. Here's the deal, okay? Remember, settle down. Yes, it's 2 losses in a row because of mind-numbing meltdowns. I know, they've blown double-digit leads. It can't feel good to be shut out by the state of Oklahoma. I don't think anybody even wants to recognize that. But what's already happened, it was happening immediately as Texas is melting down in the fourth quarter. They're losing again in a meltdown in the fourth quarter. The blame is pointed at the coach, or in this case, coaches, and not that anyone really wants to go out of their way to defend a wealthy college coach. I think it's mostly unfair. I think it's misguided. I think you're pointing the fingers in the wrong places. I just don't think you get it. Any coach making the kind of money Steve Sarkisian is making, any coach, any staff member making the kind of money his staff is making deserves to be criticized, I would argue, when it's deserved. They shouldn't be immune from criticism. They're not. I get that. There's no denying the blown leads by Texas have been shocking. This team, to be honest, though, has started quickly. It started fast. They show up. They seem to be ready to play. They seem to have a good plan. And for the most part, they've played fairly smart. They've played pretty well. I know that's hard to take in when you've blown leads in consecutive weeks. What I'm saying is, by and large, Steve Sarkisian's done a pretty good job. I don't think these meltdowns yet are because of coaching. In fact, I feel pretty comfortable. In fact, I'm going to make the argument right now it has nothing to do with coaching. The reality is pretty harsh. It's simple, and you're not going to like it. Texas has lost to better teams. Cowboys fans and Texas fans are the same. You just refuse to acknowledge that somebody's just flat out better. Texas has lost to better teams on consecutive weeks. Not only that, and maybe more importantly than just being better, the teams that have beaten Texas have all done it the exact same way, and Texas doesn't have an answer. And this is what bothers people, but there is no answer. It's a mismatch. All 3 Texas losses so far this year have been similar. In fact, they've almost, except 2 have been second half blowouts, but they've looked a lot alike. The strategy has been a lot alike. All 3 teams that have beaten Texas have beaten them in the exact same way. And I'm going to give you a tip. Don't make football more complicated than it is. I know fans want to do that. You think it's all about drawing up plays or all about schemes or all about whiteboards and video study. It's really not any more complicated than this. It is 11 one-on-one matchups. It's a lot like basketball. Football is mostly like basketball. It's people going up against each other, and then it's really a matter of coaching to find if you can get a mismatch somewhere. So for all the skill and the flash that Texas has, and there's plenty. I mean, there's no argument. There's guys that can throw it. There's guys that can catch it. There's guys that can run it. I mean, they have a ton of skill. And Steve Sarkisian, to be honest, uses it pretty well. I don't think there's any argument about offensive play calling. They do some pretty good things. They start games pretty quickly. But, okay, so Arkansas, Oklahoma, and now Oklahoma State have all done the same thing. When the game was on the line, for Arkansas, it just worked from the start because they play this way all the time. But when the game is on the line, each of those teams shoved Texas around. They all 3 dominated Texas by running at them and running over them at will. John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of Atx Hot Sauce in all 50 states, now in several retail outlets as well. So we're going to turn it over to the social media rock chef superstar, and we're going to walk through a few sauces and why you should buy. We've done beet heat, so we're second in line now for the tasting. Don't forget, everyone, go to atxhotsauce.com. So here we go.
All right, so this one is our smoked habanero 5-pepper. We smoke habaneros with ancho,
Is that going to hurt?
This one? No,
Yeah.
This one's actually really, really good.
Okay.
This is like your traditional tapatía, but without the vinegar in it, right? And because of that fermentation process that we've talked about all the time. This one is great on sandwiches, pizzas, things like that. Great on hot wings. I think you're going to really like this one too, especially the smoky flavor with the adobe chipotle and the the smoked habaneros. We actually smoked the habaneros before we.
Does that go with the cab?
This would not go with the cab. This would go with the great Chenin Blanc, though.
I teed you up with that one.
Yeah.
That is good. That's good.
Good. It's just classic take. Well, it's a new take on a classic item. So it's called smoked habanero 5-pepper.
All right, don't forget
One of my
ATX.
favorites.
Don't forget atxhotsauce.com. Before you blame coaches and schemes, please realize that when the guy across, remember that concept of 11 one-on-one matchups all over the field, when the guy across from you can shove you around, there's no defensive scheme to stop it. It really is that simple. And if you want numbers to back all this up, it's not that difficult either. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to pick this one out. But here you go. Arkansas had, 360 yards rushing or something like that. Arkansas had a ridiculous 7.1 yards per carry against Texas. Okay, now, wherever you are in the football spectrum, trust me when I tell you, somebody puts up these kind of running numbers against you, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Now, Arkansas did it start to finish. Arkansas shoved Texas around from the get-go. It's the only way they play. And the problem for Texas is they're not built to be able to take on teams that do what Arkansas did the entire game, Oklahoma did in the second half, and Oklahoma State did in the fourth quarter. They're just not built to take it. They're not good enough. They're not strong enough. They're not fit enough. So they have Arkansas is 7.1 yards per carry. That is a ridiculous number. Oklahoma, remember that second half beatdown? Oklahoma in the second half. Now Oklahoma had 8.1 yards per carry. 8. Texas had no answer. Get to this past weekend. Even with a very good first half showing, and Texas played pretty well in the first half. Texas loses at home to Oklahoma State because they gave up almost 5 yards per rush. You'd say, well, Jeff, that's better, but what in the second half? When the physical part of the game matters, when the only thing that really matters is the physical part, in the second half, they made this guy, Jaylen Warren, look like Barry Sanders. He had 193 for the entire game. That's pretty brutal. Somebody rushes for 193 yards, you're usually going to lose. He had 155 in the second half. I guarantee you lose when one guy is 155 and a half. You're never going to win. That's why the table was flipped. That's 154 and a half by one guy. You don't have to be a genius to figure this out. What does it mean going forward? It means the same thing might happen to them again. They can't reinvent the personnel on the fly. They can't just go and find defensive tackles that are different types of players. They are what they are right now. And I think they actually do a decent job trying to cover themselves from getting mauled in the running game. It's really about their front seven talent, defensive front seven and talent and fitness. And I've probably said it 50 times and people laughed and said, oh yeah, that's the way it is, old man. But the old school rule always follows. Okay, this really never changes. When you suck on defense, you're on borrowed time. The game's going to break. The season's going to break. You're on borrowed time when you suck on defense. And the reason why that concept matters is because when you suck on defense, all the pressure now is on your quarterback and your offense. It's hard to be perfect at quarterback. The wind blows, it rains, you throw a bad ball. So it magnifies all the pressure on your offense, and nobody's going to be that good and that perfect. So, sorry, Texas fans, they suck on run defense, so they've been on borrowed time.
From the Hot Pie Media Studios in Austin, Texas, it's the Jeff Ward Show. Listen at jeffwardshow.com.